ready to go.
Okay. I'm Sandra Bendayan. I'm interviewing Deborah Pfeffer. Today is the 8th of April, 1996. We're doing this interview for the Holocaust Oral History Project, and John Grant is our producer. This is part 2 of the interview. And also, we are doing the interview in your home, Deborah. I had a few questions that I wanted to ask you from our previous session. You had mentioned your maternal grandparents, but I wonder if you would tell us the names of your grandparents on your father's side.
This is
Mm.
they are cleaning,
Who's cleaning?
I think upstairs.
No, he was talking about the plane.
Oh,
Actually, there was planes, sirens, all sorts of things last night.
Yeah, that is, okay, here we go.
So you were about to say about your grandparents.
yes, and this is very difficult for me to tell because I don't know too much. Because my father died so soon that I never even saw him. So I was told by my mother mostly about her, you know, grandparents, parents, and sisters and brothers. I know one thing, that my father was born in another small town, and he was a scholar. He was ordained as a rabbi, but he didn't practice it. He had 2 brothers. One brother emigrated to London. We never heard from him. We never heard from him. Another brother was living in Warsaw. He made very well financially, but we were not in contact because he was too well financially. And my mother wouldn't even try to ask him for anything. But this, what I remember is that one time I was then a member of Hashomer Hatzayir, and it came a young man and came to our door, and he said his name is Pflanzer. So Pflanzer was and he said he comes from Warsaw, and he is our cousin. So we invited him to stay in our house, and he was a delegate from Hashomer Hatzayir from Warsaw, and he came to our town to speak. But we never kept up with him. He stayed and ate with us and slept in our house and everything, but we never heard from him. Another story what I heard, this is only what I heard, is that he had an older sister, and she had a PhD in psychiatry, and then at this time, you know, in Poland, to have, you know, such a degree, it was pretty unheard of, especially a Jewish girl. But what happened to them, I don't know.
And you never met those grandparents, I guess.
Oh, no, never. Never. One thing I remember, that when my sister Rachel, who emigrated to Paris, which we were very close, and she needed to emigrate to Paris. She needed some kind of a document from the Polish where her father was born. So she went to this little town and obtained I suppose a birth certificate or something, and that was it.
Yeah, I wanted to ask, yes, to explain how it was that I believe both your older brother and older sister emigrated to France.
Yes.
Leon? Went to France also?
Leon and Rachel.
How was it that they came to go to France?
Because I think I told you that my father had 2 children from his first marriage when my mother married him. And his 2 children, the name was Bella and Shalom. Bella, when my mother was married to my father, she was 17. Bella was 14. Afterwards, she married a young man from Lublin, and they decided to emigrate to America. On the way, they stopped in Paris, and that's where they remained. Shalom was a young man, and he somehow wound up during the war, the First World War, in Germany. I suppose, he was volunteering there for work or something. And then he came, Bella, had him come to Paris. So this was, like one child and, helped the other. And that's why these Rachel and Leon ended up in Paris.
Okay. I also remember you saying once you were in the ghetto, at a point your sister hired a buggy to come and get you and your mother.
Oh, you mean from not a body, it was a wagon.
A wagon, a horse and
Yes.
buggy. To pick you up and take you to where
To
she
her,
was staying.
to where she was. And what I think is the name of the little village that she was living in was Shechekov. And this was my sister Anna. And she was married there, and she lived there, so she came and got us there.
What I was wondering is, I thought that you couldn't freely go in and out of the ghetto, and I was wondering how she managed for you to get out of the ghetto.
Everything, was a risk. Whatever you do and whatever you did was at risk. And she risked because she wanted us to come out. And that's when we went. And once we were on the way, on the road, nobody stopped us. Because it was just typical. A Polish family, going in a wagon, and that was it.
How did you sneak out of the ghetto, you and your mother?
It was not a ghetto, a closed ghetto in Kazimierz. The closed ghetto was in Demblin, but in Kazimierz it was not a closed ghetto. It was, a ordinance, you have to live here, but it wasn't closed.
You could just walk out.
You could just walk out if you were lucky not to, encounter any Polish people who would denounce you, or not to encounter a Polish policeman. And there were few German soldiers then, the Einsatzkommando it was called, and they couldn't make a difference from a Jew or not Jew.
And you took your armbands off.
Of course. This was the first thing what we did. We took the armbands off.
Also, would you tell us the name of Ephraim's wife and child?
Oh, yes. Ephraim's wife was Bathsheba. And in Yiddish it was called Sheva. And they had 2 boys, what I told you. The older one was Yechiel, named after my father, and the younger one was Isaac, after my grandfather. And the younger one, like I said, somehow, I don't know if they're in the house was some rat poison or something, and he got hold of it, and he got poisoned. This is the younger one. And then with the older one, it was another story. She went, and my brother were helped by this Volksdeutsche I told you about to cross the Vistula to go there to another ghetto. And then from the other ghetto, when it was being liquidated, they again fled. So they wound up together with my sister and I and my mother, my sister's husband and his mother, his sister and children. We all lived in one room.
What was your sister's baby's name
Yechiel,
also?
yeah. Everybody in the family, the boys were named Yechiel. And he is named Yechiel.
You're referring to your son, Hank, who's here with us today, too.
Yes, his name is Yechiel too.
Well, the point in time where we left off last time was where you had just been released by the Ukrainian policemen and they were pointing you in the direction of a new camp. Now, on this day, you had left the ghetto with a young woman who was going to hide you, but then got scared. You found your mother disappeared.
It was not the same day.
Oh.
It was maybe 2 days later.
You remained back in the old ghetto for 2 days more?
Yes, but it was not in the ghetto. Like I said, we were on up there in the attic, and one said that he knows a Polish family that they would house us for the night. So after we came back into the ghetto and found nobody there, so we went to this Polish, I can't even remember a name, or I didn't even know a name. And they housed us overnight, and then in the morning we split up.
How did you cope with the loss of your mother?
It was not only my mother. It was then the same day my sister and her baby, my sister-in-law, and her little boy, Yechiel, the older one, and my brother-in-law and my brother. They went a few days earlier to these Polish people to sew for them. And it was awful. It was awful. When I went out, I remember I ran first where my sister lived. I went to this house and I stepped over a dead body to get into the house. Nobody was there. And this woman, a woman was lying dead, shot to death, right in front of the house, what mine. It was awful, but you couldn't let your guard down. You couldn't. There were just few people, you know, looking for some hiding place, looking for something to hold on to.
So you knew your sister had been picked up?
Yes, yes, because she wasn't, if she wasn't, you know, at home, so she was picked up the same day with her boy. He was then, Yechiel was then maybe 6 years old.
And your sister-in-law, was she picked up that day too?
Yes, the same day, but she was picked up right next door to ours. But she stayed with another family. In this other family, everybody was picked up.
Did you see that happen?
No, no, I didn't see it. But what I saw when we were in the attic, marching the people, this is what I saw. They were marching, dropping, you know, on the way from this. It was a hot day. And they were marching them and on both sides. They were Gestapo, so that they wouldn't run away from while marching. And we knew that they were marching them to the train station. But I didn't see, not my mother, nobody, but I just saw people, Jews, marching and marching and marching and marching without an end. Yeah, they were marching. And in the directions, what everybody knew, to the train stations. We knew we didn't want to believe it. Not we didn't want to, we couldn't believe it. Because it was such it was so unheard of that a nation like Germany, which had a very high culture, and they could do things like this, we couldn't believe it. We couldn't. We saw it, and at the beginning they started very little, you know, inconveniences, what they subjected the Jews to, and little by little they increased it. And we still thought, oh, we can live with it. We can live if they go and want us to work, slave labor and everything. We can do it. We can survive. But then when they started liquidating the ghettos, we knew it is not, and they called it Aussiedlung. It means to resettle. That's what they called it. And we knew if somebody was going to resettle, that they wouldn't take, you know, just old women and children, have them march, because they know that they couldn't go that far. It was quite far to the train station. And this would be impossible for them to do, that they would provide some kind of transportation, they would provide some kind of food, none of it. So, but they called it resettlement, that they are going to resettle from one ghetto to the other, to the next one, to a bigger one. But they were, even if they took some people to go to another ghetto, it was only to concentrate the Jews in one place. So they would have it easier to round them up. It was a diabolical scheme.
Had anybody managed to escape and come back to tell of what had happened
Yes.
to the transports?
Yes, that's how we knew. Yes, I personally haven't seen anybody who would have escaped. But the grapevine was so, you know, that we knew what it was going on. This, what I think, is my brother-in-law, and his mother always was very good with the priest's household there, because she delivered whatever they needed. And she said that the priest told them that they are in killing the Jews. They take them to the wagons, they take them to and then they end up somewhere and they are killing them. It wasn't even mentioned where, but the workers, Polish workers who worked on the trains, they came back and they told the priest. So the priest, you know, let it around.
Did they speak of the concentration camps or of killing the Jews like out in the forest?
No, they said that they are taking them to a station and taking them out from whoever survived, taking them out and taking them somewhere, and there is no sound from there. So they cannot hear anything more. The Polish, you know, these conductors of the trains, they were ordered to clean out the wagons and then to go back. And that's when they came. But they said there was no sound. And if there was no sound, so it means that there was nobody living there. And my people, what I later, you know, tried to trace, they were sent to Treblinka. This was the closest into Treblinka. And there in Treblinka, they were gassing them and, you know, doing. That's what I know.
And you, what happened after you were pointed in the direction of this camp?
I went. I walked there. I walked. They told me to go this way, and I went, and I came, and this camp was with barbed wire around. And there were guards, but the guards were Jewish guards. They had these armbands, and it was KP, like concentration camp police or something. KP was, and they had these guards on. And when I came to this guard house, it was a little shack. So they asked me if I have this. Later on I found out that every inmate there had pinned a round little shield and the number, and with a safety pin. If I have this number, I said no, I didn't have one. So I said, you cannot come in. You have to have a number. And there are always miracles. Another one who had a KP on, and he looked at me and he said, "You are Hannah Kugel." I said, "No, Hannah Kugel was my sister." We looked very much alike. I have this. Everybody said so. I didn't see it. I was taller than her, but it doesn't matter. So he recognized the resemblance in me. So he took me aside. He said, "Wait till night, and I will let you in." So there were bushes around. It was hot. I sat there in the bushes, covered myself up, you know, with the thing, and sat there. And when it came night, when all the others, because the people were walking outside the camp, so when they were started marching in, so I blended in with them and came in.
Well, how long had it been since you'd eaten?
Eaten? Who thought about eating?
So you didn't have anything.
But when I came in, when everybody stood in line for food, I went there and stood in line too. I don't care. So I got a soup. So this was, but he told me in the morning you have to leave with them again. And at night again to wait. So for 3 days I was going out with them, coming back with them, and illegal. I was illegal.
They weren't checking the numbers, though, it sounds like.
No, they weren't. I suppose there were others who did the same thing. But one day, when I was coming in, they started checking the numbers. And I didn't have a number. So they said, out you go. So I sat again in the bushes, and then I saw underneath the wires, the barbed wires, was a hole. And the woman was crawling through this hole to the other side. So I thought, if she can do it, I can do it too. When she went out there, I crawled right after her. She went away, and when I looked up, I saw legs and boots, high boots. So I thought, oh my God, who is this? I stood up, and there was a man dressed in a uniform, but it was not a German uniform. I could see this. But he talked German to me. What are you doing here? Why are you crawling under? So I said, oh, I lost my number. Later on, I found out that he was a Austrian Jew. He was an inmate, but he knew German, so he was the chief of the couples. And he let me go. But from far, I kept this woman in my eye to see what she is going to do. After he let me go, he didn't talk to me long. I said I lost my number, and that was it. I kept watching her, and I saw her meeting a young man who I recognized before, that he was some kind of a, how would we say, not a commandant, but he was a Gruppenführer, you know. He was in charge of a group who went out to work. And she was talking to him, and I saw money changing hands. When I saw this, I didn't have money. The ring to them, and she went away. He took the money, and I told him, yes, he told her to come to the office. So she went to the office, I went right after her. And he gave her a number, and I said, how about me? So he said, oh, she was supposed to be here, she was registered here before. And I said, I didn't tell him about the money, but I told him, listen, if you could register her, you register me too. You better do. And he said, but don't tell nobody. I said, I'm not going to tell him. And he gave me a number. And since then, I was a legal Häftling, a legal labor camp inmate. This was the legal thing.
Did this camp have a name?
Demblin. D-E-M-B-L-I-N. Demblin. I used to go, I was attached to a group this was a Flugplatz. A Flugplatz is a landing where they land airplanes. And this was even during when the Polish government there. But they didn't have, like it here, a landing place with it is paved or something. It was grass. Whenever a plane landed, the wheels would sink in and tear out the grass. So we used to take sod and repair this. We used to get out about very early in the morning, before the planes were supposed to land, and try to repair. It was very heavy because the sods, they were cut into squares, so we had to pick them up and carry them to the spots and pound them in. And for a time, and this one who gave me the number, he was in charge of this group, and that's why he could attach me, and this woman too.
How long was your work day?
12 hours, 13 hours. We had to march out and then march back. And to march back, it was a lot worse because we were very tired. And there, yes, came like a soup kitchen. Came, and we had, in the middle of the day, we had soup. It was watery and, you know, all this kind, but at least I had a soup. And when we came home to the barracks, so we had some bread. The bread was mixed with sawdust, but we were hungry, we ate it. And this was going on until 1943. Yeah, in the middle, what it happened, I think I told you about this, about the jewelry. Did I tell you last time?
The jewelry? What about the jewelry?
That I was accused of taking some jewelry from a girl, and she had it all the time in her straw mattress. But supposedly she put it a little bit further and she couldn't find it. This is a story that I have to start from the beginning, because it was so traumatic for me. It was then very early that I was in this camp. I didn't know too many people. I knew very, very few. I knew this wife of this couple. She befriended me. She was very nice. Kaminska was her name. And you know, when you come, when you're a stranger, so everybody tries to take advantage of you, or you are not a person. You are not. If somebody meets somebody on the street and knows them, says hello or says hi, but if you don't know them, you just ignore them. I was ignored because I didn't know anybody. But one night, there was only one light hanging, one bulb, and it was at the head of the barracks. I was at the end of the barracks, and I wanted to sew up my dress. I had this only one dress, and it tore every day. I had another hole. So I went there to the head of the barracks, and there were 3 levels. So I sat on the highest level so I could see, and I started sewing up my dress. Another lady who was there, and she was from Demblin, because mostly the people from there were from the same town. And she was there darning some socks. So we both sat and talked. And all of a sudden, a girl who was on the other side, but 2 at the head of the barracks, and she started screaming, "My jewelry is missing." She was from the same town, and she must have gotten her jewelry from home, and she had 2 sisters, and she started, "It's missing." So somebody stole it. And who could have stolen it? You did it. She pointed at me. I said, "I don't have any jewelry. I didn't steal any jewelry." And she said, "Nobody could have done it but you. So maybe you put it somewhere. You better give it up. If no, I will call the couple." I said, "Call the couple. I don't have what to give up. I didn't take your jewelry." So she called a couple. Another one, not this one what I knew. And he started talking to me. "You better give this back. If you are not going to give this back, we are going..." Oh, I'm still upset when I talk about it. "We are going to report to you to the commander." The commander was a German. I said, "What do you want from me? I don't have it. I didn't steal it. I didn't move even." And this woman who sat beside me said she didn't even move from there. But it was not enough for her. "Yes, it's missing. It's missing. And nobody has taken it but..." And then I heard from the other side one girl saying, "Now we are in trouble. We have a thief in here, and how are we going to manage this? If we have a thief, we have to watch her all the time." And she pointed at me. And then her sister, this girl who started looking, and her sister worked with me in this, it was called Landwirtschaft. And she said, let's look. And they found the jewelry. The same girl who said about, we have a thief here, she came up to me, she said, you should scratch her eyes out, because she accused you of such a thing. So, and I knew right away what kind of type she is. So I ignored her, I went back to my place, and I cried the whole night through, having to go through this. I don't know, did I ever tell you this?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah?
Maybe we should
It's
stop here.
lunchtime.
We left off with you telling the story about being a jewel thief. What I was thinking about too is, were you always an outspoken person?
I wouldn't say so. I wouldn't say so. I had to get good and angry until I would speak out.
Is that what made you motivated to talk to the Ukrainian police that way?
That's
and to
right.
ask to be registered
Because
that way?
I really didn't care then. I really didn't care. That's what I thought. I just have to tell them what it's awaiting them and their families, what I feel that they should know. And I didn't expect that they would let me go, not at all. I just, really, I didn't care if I will live or die. And this is what I told them, that I don't mind going where my mother and sisters and brothers went, but I just want you to know that you haven't won yet. The war is still on. And what is going to happen to you and your families, God only knows. And I suppose this motivated them to let me go, or maybe they just thought what they did with one ring, 2 people, I don't know, but they took it anyways.
Did your will to live come back when you tried to enter the camp? I mean, it sounded like you wanted to enter the camp.
You know, the last thing what my mother told me was, you should live and tell the story. Maybe this motivated me. I have no idea. And everybody said, oh, somebody has to live, somebody has to survive to tell the story. And that's why I am motivated too, the whole time. There was never a memorial, the Siska Memorial, Yom HaShoah, that I would not attend. I would make him come from everywhere he was, so he would take me. And as a matter of fact, on the 14th, we are going to have here in Palo Alto. And they contacted me, they wanted me to light a candle, and they contacted me again to ask who is going to be, because they want very much that the children should be. So I told them Hank is going to be, and Susanna, his little girl. My daughter is impossible, she can't go, because she's running a 3,000-year jubilee for Jerusalem in JCC for the people from the early childhood. In the 28th, it's going to be an old city. So she is involved with this, and she won't be able to come. So, what can we do?
So you feel like being able to tell the story motivated you to
This-
want to live. Well,
Yes.
did you think that you might be killed
Oh, yes.
when you were trying to get into that camp?
Oh, yes, yes. All the time. But there was always, you know, this in the back of your mind, oh, maybe I'll be the one who will have to tell this story. So I have to do everything what is possible. Not everything, but whatever, you know, I wouldn't want to be, you know, a couple. I wouldn't want have to be, you know, somebody who would collaborate with the Germans. This I wouldn't do. But just to try to keep myself alive and not doing anything what is unethical. And that's why it got to me when she told me, you know, that I'm a thief, which in all my life I never heard this word directed at me.
What would have been the punishment for being a thief, say?
I have
In
no
that barrack.
idea. If they would have taken me to the commander, he might have had me shot. Yes, he might have. I don't know exactly, but he might have.
Did the other prisoner inmates, did they have any code of punishment if one of them was a thief?
Between themselves,
Yes.
I have no idea. I have no idea. I know one thing, that one boy, he was about 13 or 14, and his mother was in this camp, and a brother and two sisters, and he was working, you know, somewhere, and he stole some soap, but he stole a lot of it. It was like a box of soap, and he was shot. But he was stealing it from the German warehouse. This was different. But who knows? I have no idea. I didn't even analyze it then. I just was very hurt because, you know, I was accused of a thing which I didn't do. But not, I didn't even think about it, what they are going to me. And anyways, it was just, you know, whatever they are going to do, they are going to do. But if I can help it, I won't let them. And that was mine code or something like this. But later on I was accepted and I had many friends. Many friends.
At that point, what was your religious point of view? Did you feel like you believed in God or gods or not? Or
No. No. I was raised very orthodox and everything, no. We just thought if there is a God, he shouldn't have let these things happening. No, there were some who were religious. As a matter of fact, I knew one young man, after the liberation, he became a rabbi. And we tried, but no, I didn't stake my hopes all on God.
what were the conditions like in that barrack?
There were 3 tiers, you say, and when one, and we were sleeping so close, when one moved, the other one had to move too, to turn. And the fleas were terrible because in the stuffed things, it was stuffed with not so dust, but so shavings. And the fleas were there terrible. Everybody had, you know, these flea punctures. And we did our best to, once a week, I think, we are allowed to go to a shower. It was a common shower. And no soap, nothing. And some people hid food underneath. So this wasn't very sanitary either. There were some people these people who came from this town, and they came in whole families. So they had connections with the Polish people, and I came with only, you know, one dress, and that was it, yes. I had a shawl, not a shawl, but a scarf, which I knitted myself. But this is a different story with this shawl.
Mm.
And this is what I used, and my dress kept falling apart. Whenever I had something to patch it up, so my dress, I called it the coat of all colors, like Joseph's.
Where did you get a needle and thread?
I suppose somebody gave it to me there. I didn't have it on me. Somebody must have given it to me. And that's when I got a needle and thread.
How were you dealing with things like menstruation throughout all this period?
This was another story again. We had, you know, some rags and used it. And then we washed it in cold water, because there was no, and dried it and used it again, and this burned like anything. But some, I didn't, you know, lose. I had the whole time I was menstruating. But some girls did lose it the whole time and didn't have the cycle.
It sounds like you barely had enough to eat. Were you hungry all the time?
Hungry all the time, yes. And hungry I especially was hungry for vegetables. And there was a time that I was in a group who were, you know, assigned to pull vegetables to go on this. And that was the main source for me. This little number I used for a peeler, and peeled off the carrots. And I used to eat it raw cabbage, raw carrots, and that was mine. Yeah, supplementary.
Were any of the capos or other administrators ever kind to you?
They were prisoners too. And some wanted favors.
What kind of favors?
Sexual favors. And not everybody was ready to do it. I wasn't. I knew a girl, and she did have an affair with, you know, one of these, but after she liberated, she just dumped him. She couldn't stand him. And she was a young girl. And there was another one who was, Venkart was his name. He was from Wien too. And he had a wife and I think a child there too. And he was always, one girl was from Czechoslovakia, a beautiful girl. And she was even younger than I. She was maybe 16. And he used to come and ask her to come with him into a warehouse. And she came back, so she had a dress, she had shoes, she had, you know, this kind of thing. But so there was another one who was, well, this was in Demblin. And he was too a German Jew. And he was very kind to a girl, a Polish girl from the same town, that she lost everybody but a little sister. And she was maybe 3 or 4 years old. And this girl was so protective of her that she just, you know, accepted the advances of this other one. And they were liberated and she married him. And he helped her with this little girl. She was very, very protective. You know, there were a lot of instances like this.
And you, were you able to make any close friends for support, or did you feel totally alone?
No, I made close friends. I made close friends with a woman who, it's always, you know, if you have some connections. Her husband had a cousin in my hometown, and I knew the cousins. You know, that's how we got together. And we were very close friends, and it was very important to have somebody, a buddy. If somebody stood in line for soup or for something else, and you needed to go, so she would keep the place. And it was very, very useful to have a buddy, and we became buddies. As a matter of fact, she was liberated too, and she went to Israel. Just before she got liberated, she found out she had a boy and a girl. Her husband took the boy and she took the girl. And she was then in Warsaw. It was during the war. And the girl got sick, very sick, and she was a baby. And she took her to a Catholic hospital and left her there without giving her name or anything, and she went away. And then she wound up in the same camp. After the war, she was looking for this girl. She found her. But so it was just she found her. She knew her husband and the boy, they perished. But the girl, she thought she might have had a chance. And she found her, and she got her out. They evacuated this hospital, and she traced all the way around, you know, Poland, wherever the thing, and she found her, and she took her to Israel, and she married a very Orthodox Jew, and the daughter married. I saw her when I visited Israel. She came to see me, and that was it. Yeah, I was glad that she found her.
Do you remember the name of this woman who was your close friend?
Rivka, but the last name, It eludes me now. I will remember it later, but now it eludes me. I know her first name was Rivka. And
So you said you were in this camp in Demblin through 43,
till 43, yes.
and then what happened?
And then they wanted to build a camouflage airport. So the German, the airplanes could land there and not, for the enemies not to know, the Russians especially, not to know about it. So we were selected, and they selected then girls who were not attached, who didn't have any families, especially, and who could do, you know, a heavy job. They didn't ask you, they selected, and I was selected.
Why people without a family?
Because if the family was there, so they would want to go too. So they selected only single girls, and there were some men, but they thought that they might, there was one, an electrician, and they sent me in this, I remember the place was called Uleunsch. And we had there a German commander. And he was such a thief that he, if they would catch him, you know, the Germans, he would have gotten shot. And he was a terrible thief. It was, you know, we were supposed to supply for the people vegetables and wheat, meat, all kinds of things. So I just had the feeling that he is a thief. Somehow, so I told him, if you will let me go, first I was supposed to work in the fields, but then it got cold. I didn't have a coat. I didn't have, you know, the shoes, they were the wooden shoes and not the socks. And I thought, if I will have to go and work in the fields in such a cold, I won't survive. So I thought, I have to think of something. And then I saw that they had sheep in this, especially this thing. So I told him, you know what? When they share, and from the surrounding, the Polish villagers came to share the sheep. So I said, when they share the sheep, there are some women who can spin the yarn out of it, and I can knit for you some sweaters. He jumped at the occasion. We got some of the Polish girls who were working there, and they got some, because I couldn't spin, and they spun the yarn. So I said, now you have to look for some dye to dye it. If no, it's going to be raw. So he got some dye, black dye. I dyed this yarn. And he said, you know what, I need socks. I said, I can make you socks too. I was sitting in the warm kitchen and knitting the socks for him, and I made 12 pairs of socks, high socks. If he would be found out what he is doing with this, he was supposed to deliver for the German command. And then, while sitting there, he had very often parties. So there was a girl, a Polish girl, who was the cook, and I was supposed to help her. So I helped her, and then I saw that they have hams, they have liquor.
Better stop for a minute. You were talking about the wonder of the foods you saw.
Oh yes, they had so much food. You know, they didn't give us, but I wanted to prolong my ability to stay in the kitchen and to stay, you know, warm. And something else what I could do when I was in the kitchen and I was having to peel potatoes for the soups and everything. So I was very friendly with the cook. So I told her, give me some potatoes. Took some potatoes and cooked some potatoes. When the girls came home from the field, so they had cooked warm potatoes, which was, and I wanted to prolong, and I thought there was so much food. What can I do to prolong it? So I told him, you know what you can do? I can pack a box for you and camouflage. You could put ham inside and camouflage it with apples. So he had a wife with kids there back in Germany. And I told him what kind of a crate he should buy, or let somebody made. I don't know how he came up with the exact crate what I told him. And I packed the crate. The crates were, the sleds were not one beside the other. They were distance, so that the apples could breathe. And I packed it all around with apples inside the ham, so nobody could be the wiser unless it was opened. And this is he shipped to his family.
How did you get access to all that food?
This food was when he had the parties, and he invited all kinds of, you know, his comrades. I didn't have access, no. I had only, you know, to prepare and to help out, no. I helped out the cook. And that's when I saw these hams. And we knew that there in Germany was, you know, too a need for it. So I thought he will bite this, and he bit it.
Did you get something in exchange for helping him out?
Just being able to sit and have the potatoes. He didn't know about it. He wouldn't have approved that the cook gave him potatoes to cook for the girls. But the cook, she was too, you know, she was a Polish girl, but they went, you know, home for the night. We had to stay there over. And I stayed there till the next year, 44.
Seems that was a very wonderful job to have, to be in the kitchen.
And how did I get this job? It's something, you know, little things. I had, while in camp in Wemblin, I got hold of some yarn, all kinds of yarn. So many colors that nobody would even want to do something with it. I pieced it all together and I made a sweater for myself. And there were all kinds of, and it didn't matter to me a pattern or a scheme of colors, just that it would be a continuation. And I made this sweater. And when I came there to Ullens, and it was so many colors, and he noticed this. So he said, where I got this sweater? So I said, I made it myself. And that's why I started talking, and I got this job.
So then in 44, what happened?
This was in 44. And then we were recalled because the Russian front was starting moving west. And we were taken back to Demblin, and we spent still till January 45. But the way, you know, and they liquidated the ghetto, the camp in Demblin, and this camp was located by a, I can't, some kind, but they were liquidating it. And we had to go to the station, and we were loaded in Oppen, and we didn't know where we were going at all. I had my sweater, my multicolored dress, and I had this scarf. And the scarf, I made it before even. I took it everywhere where I went. We came, they didn't know, nobody told us where we are going or what we are going to do. Get up and go, and that was it. But we saw one time, I can't remember how long we were, you know, in transit, that there was a group of people wearing armbands walking on the rails. So we understood these were Jews. I don't know, but people must have had a pencil and paper. So I wrote down my name, where I come from, and anybody who finds it and knows somebody from my hometown should give this note. And I threw the note on the railroad. A lot of people did then too. And I didn't know, we wound up in Częstochow. And that's where my sweater was taken, my shawl was taken, everything we had to take. I still had my dress on because I had a dress. One time in the barracks there in Częstochow, I come in, there was a Jewish woman who was in charge of this barrack. And she was an Häftling, she was an inmate too. And I look, and she sits and unravels my shawl. She was unraveling. So I asked her, what are you doing? I didn't say anything that it was mine because I was too afraid. I didn't know who she was, but the other ones told me later on, it's good that you didn't say anything that this was yours, because she would have denounced me. So she said, oh, I'm making a sweater, I'm going to make a sweater. So I said, where did you get it? Oh, she said, from the warehouse. Somebody gave it to me. I turned around, went away, but later on I was so glad that I didn't know up to it. This woman survived, and she was a very, not just a tough cookie, but she was so, you know, to do whatever the Germans told her. Later on, after the liberation, we met up with her. And when she looked around and she saw faces that she knew, she just went away. It was at a bar mitzvah in Cleveland. And
You met up again in Cleveland in the bar mitzvah?
at the bar mitzvah, we saw her, we recognized her because there were a lot of, I went to this bar mitzvah to a girl who was in the same camp with me in, you know, in Częstochowa. So she said, look, what should we do about her? Should we go and denounce her? I said, let her go. She didn't do anything, you know, to hurt, but just that she was the representative of the Germans in there. She didn't beat anybody, she didn't, you know. And me, especially, that she was unraveling my shawl, I could have used it. And, you know, such little things you remember.
What was this camp like? Was it any different than the other camps you were in?
This was, again, a different camp. They were making ammunition. This was strictly an ammunition camp. That's where I met my husband too.
And what's his name?
My husband's name? Yeshaya, but it's Shaya. We used to call him Shaya, Sam. And the first thing what they did is line up the people who came. But there were people who were there previous, before us. And these who worked in the ammunitions, they had to work with some kind of chemicals that everything changed and they were yellow. Their hair was yellow, their faces turned yellow, their hands, and everything turned yellow. And I recognized there, between the yellow people, a cousin of mine. He was working there at the ammunitions. I didn't know then about this, what it entails to work in the factory. I didn't know at all. But I was standing, I was tall, and they start just like eeny, miny, mo. There was, you will go work here, you will go work here, you will go work here. And they told me I will go and I have to go and work at where the laundry. So I was a little bit taken aback, and I thought, oh boy, the laundry. And then came up to me a man who was working there, who was there before, and he said, take it, this is a good job, take it, take it, take it, don't say anything. So I listened to him, and I took it, and that's where my husband was working there too. That's where we met. But this was, I don't think I could have stood it working in the ammunition factory. Especially, my husband worked for a time there. It was a Blei machine. I can't remember how to say it in English. Blei. This was special, and this was a horrible job. He said, and somehow he got out of it, and he came to work at the laundry. But to work at the laundry, the people who were there in this Częstochowa camp all were herded once a week to take a shower. They undressed in their shirts. I have to say it. they were crawling with lice. Crawling. We had the job to pick up these shirts and put them in hot water. But we couldn't even go near the shirts. So they gave us long poles and we picked up the shirts and put them in the hot cauldron with hot water. And then we had to take the shirts out from there and hang them up. It was like a room. It was smaller than this. And there were poles, and we had to throw the shirts over this. And it was hot, and it was terrible. When you went in for a minute, you couldn't stand it. You couldn't. And we went in. I had to go in, because this was the job we had to do. And then hand it back to the men, because they didn't have a change. The men and the women were more, they could more take care of themselves than men. Because the women, they somehow got hold even cold water, and they would wash out something. But the men, they were in a terrible, terrible shape. They were so skinny, so you could see the bones sticking out of them. And running to retrieve a shirt. If it was there, it wasn't there. It didn't matter if it fit or it didn't fit, but so that they could get this shirt. And I worked there for 6 months.
Was there a lot of typhus then too because of the lice?
Typhus I had in ghetto there in Poland still. I mean in my hometown. Oh yes, people were dying like flies. There was typhus, and there was hunger, and there was, with everything connected with this.
Were people beaten or brutalized also?
Yes, yes. But I have my back trouble is that I was beaten still in Dublin over my back. And since then I have trouble with my back. But yes, they were beaten and they were brutalized and dying in where they were sleeping the next day, they were dead. Yes. I couldn't see anything, anybody shooting directly at the people. This I didn't see.
And your job, did you have to work 12 hours there also?
Oh, yes, yes.
Every day?
Every day.
Never had a day off?
No, never, never. And, you always had, if you knew somebody, so it was always easier. I remember, my children, they know about it, that my husband one time, he was taken outside Chancellor out to work, and he somehow got hold of 2 tomatoes and 1 onion, and he smuggled it in, and he brought it to me. So we both had it together.
What a treasure.
Oh boy, this was a treasure. Just one time. And there, while there working at this laundry, So I had access to soap. It wasn't soap like this, but it was, I don't know how it's called. You pick it up, it's like liquid soap. So I had access, so I could wash mine and even give it to my friends, some. You know, we always try to manage. And this woman, you know, who was my buddy, so she got it, and we always, and one time, this was very, I was there maybe for a month or two, and I saw a girl that I used to tutor in the ghetto. And she was very glad to see me. She came from another camp from Skaržisko. And she had a friend who worked in the warehouse. And I told her, look, I am falling out of my dress. So she said, we will see what we can do. And he brought out from the warehouse a white flour sack. I said, I can do something with it. I don't know how I got hold of some dye. I dyed it blue. I didn't care what kind, so it wouldn't be white. And I cut out a skirt and a blouse. And I sewed it up by hand. Oh boy, I was stressed. So I can think. This came in handy because I didn't have to do, and I discarded this other because it was too much. It kept, the pages kept getting, you know, pages. So what else can I tell you? And I was liberated from this camp. From Chester.
How was Liberation Day? How did that
That's
go?
what I want to tell you. This, my buddy and I made a pact that if we can get to run away from this camp, we will. We made with this Rivka. And then we heard that this camp is going to be liquidated. So we said we are going to run away. We looked around and we discovered behind the latrines, and there was the barbed wire, there was a hole. So I said, I used one time the hole, maybe we will use this one too. And that's where we were going to go through and to run away. And guess what? I suppose I was nervous or something. I needed to go to the bathroom. I said, I can't go. I have to go to the bathroom. So she said, all right, I will stay outside and wait for you. I went to the bathroom, and at this moment, the Gestapo arrived and surrendered the whole camp. This was 3 months into this Częstochowa camp. And they surrounded it, and we couldn't go anywhere, because if we would try, they would have shot us right there. And for the whole 3 months, she said, if it wouldn't be for you, we would have been liberated already, we would have been outside. And she kept harping at me, and I said, listen, I just couldn't help it. And she was afraid to go herself, because always, you know, and she kept saying it to me and saying, and I couldn't help it, and I had, you know, this on my conscience. What it turned out, after the liberation, we found out there were more people going through this before the Gestapo, and not one of them survived, because there was Polish, and you know, these who wanted to rob, even, you know, if we didn't have anything to rob, or just to get rid of Jews. So they drowned them. There was a creek, and they drowned them in there. So that's when I had my revenge. I said, you see, you wouldn't have survived, and not me. And me either, if we would have gone through the wire. We didn't know it then. Afterwards, we found out. Because I think one who ran away, and this, when they liquidated the camp, my cousin, I found out was the one who ran out too, and he got killed.
So when were you actually liberated?
We were liberated on January 17 at night, the night of the 18th. But we counted it the 17th because the people who were, we were always there, we were always surrounded. Since then, we were surrounded by Gestapo. And we didn't hear nobody, we didn't see nobody. And they ran away because the Russian front came nearer, and they apparently heard it on the radio or something, that the front is getting nearer and they don't have too much time, so they just ran by any means. There was one young boy who I knew there, and he was working for one of the Gestapo men, and he was working as a driver. So he took him with his car. He never came back. I don't know what had happened to him, but he never came back. He never showed up with a Gestapo man. And we didn't hear anybody. So through, like I said, the grapevine, that the Germans must have run away. Then it formed a self-help from the people, the prisoners. My husband was one who was going around and telling everybody not to panic, not to run out, because we don't know what is going to happen outside. They might be outside and encountering the Poles. We had two enemies to face, two enemies, and giving a comparison, I always compared the Poles as wars, because the Germans couldn't recognize us, and the Poles could. And they were denouncing us at all times, wherever they could. So, and he was running around to all the people and told them, stay put, we will see what we can do when it will be in the morning. In the morning, we looked out, and there were so many people and horses dead on the streets. So we went and stayed still in the barracks until Russians came, and we saw that we can be safe, and we went out.
What were your feelings at that point?
feelings that it was the night. At night they were bombing. We didn't know who was bombing, or the Russians or the Germans. I was standing in the door of the barrack and saw the bombs dropping from the airplane. I didn't think it could hit me.
You felt you will survive.
I just felt that this cannot hit me. I am free now. This can't hit me. But it did hit a lot of people. It did hit, but not in the camp. The camp was saved. Nobody got hit in the camp.
About how much did you weigh, do you think, when you were liberated?
I couldn't tell you. I just know that right afterwards I got pleurisy. Not in Częstochowa, but we thumped a ride from Russian soldiers who were, you know, going in these trucks. And we went to Krakow because my husband came from Krakow. So we thought there, it's a big city, so we might start there. And that's when I got so sick. I had a very high fever. There was no doctor, nobody, and my husband remembered from before the war that there was a hospital run by monks. So he said, maybe he will take me there. He took me there by streetcar, and they found that I have on my lung a spot, and the pleurisy with this everything, an X-ray. I don't know that they had an X-ray then. And they said that the spot was from tuberculosis. And they didn't have any medication to give me or anything, but they told me to stay in bed, and he did what he could. And this is another story after the liberation.
Yes.
Yeah, so.
One of the things you had mentioned that you always had back problems. I was wondering
How I came to be beaten.
Yeah, how you came to be beaten, but also, are there other aspects of your health that have suffered, you've suffered because of the war?
I did have the tuberculosis. I contacted it somewhere. I didn't even know about it.
What about nightmares?
Oh, nightmares. Last night I had a nightmare.
Just rethinking.
Oh, yes. My husband, he had terrible nightmares. He would sit up at night and scream like anything. I had my dreams, but I didn't scream. I didn't, you know. I don't know if my children heard him screaming or not, but I always calmed him down and told him, you are here. And he had terrible nightmares.
But you had some nightmares or bad dreams. You had back problems. You had the TB. Are there other things that have stayed with you? How are your teeth, for example? Did you have problems?
With my feet?
Teeth.
Oh, my teeth, yes. I had abscessed the molars here, this side and this side, and you couldn't get any, you know, medication or anything. But there was a woman who was a dentist before the war, and she was in the camp, a Jewish woman, and she had only these, what do you call these, to pull teeth.
You mean like the pliers?
That's what she did. So she pulled this one time and this one, and I have trouble since then with my teeth, yes. My husband lost all his teeth from malnutrition. I didn't, because this time that I spent eating the vegetables, the raw vegetables, this helped me. But he lost all his teeth. He had to have, you know, two both,
Plates.
yeah.
When the war was over, I expect you tried to find out what had happened to your family.
Oh yes, I tried to.
Did you find out anything?
Oh yes, I found out how my brother was killed,
How was he killed? Which brother?
Ephraim.
Ephraim.
Yes, how he was killed with my brother-in-law, that they were sewing garments for the Poles, and they denounced them after they were through. They didn't have any more material. So they denounced them for a kilo of sugar and a bottle of whiskey. And this is in my book, that a eyewitness, she knew about it.
And what happened to them? Were they shot right away?
They were shot.
And your sister?
And my sister-in-law, this is the only thing I know, that they were taking these people to Treblinka.
And your mother too, you think?
My mother. Or my mother, I don't know if she even made it to Treblinka, because they were packed so much in these cars that I doubted that she made it.
How did your older brother and sister make it in France?
Oh, my Leon, he was incarcerated. There was in the outskirts of Paris, the Jews who were not French citizens. So they were taken to this camp. While he was in camp, his wife was as a Greek citizen, and when she came to France, to Paris, her father was already a French citizen. So she got the citizenship somehow. So she stayed out, but later on it didn't help her. And she bore the last boy, who is now alive, while my brother was in this camp. And then they liquidated the camp and they sent them to Auschwitz. He was killed in Auschwitz. My other sister Rachel, she got sent to Auschwitz from Paris, and she perished there in Auschwitz. But Leon's 3 children, they are alive, because his wife, who stayed outside, so she had a French woman who took care of her children while she was working. So this French woman took the children to her village where she came from. And she said that these were her relatives or something. And she took in Rachel's daughter, who is alive in Israel, and she's in a kibbutz. And she hid all these children. And the youngest of my brother, Leon, he was born in 42. And she took this baby.
Did the Greek wife survive?
No.
She did not survive. You are the only survivor of your siblings,
Yes,
and brothers
yes, yes. I am the only survivor. But these children, you know, is one of my brothers. So one lives in Israel, and her daughter is now here. She has a baby, and her daughter, she's very much, you know, interested because her mother survived like this. And she's going to go to next week with us to the Holocaust. But from the siblings, no. I am the only one.
Obviously, you left Poland, I don't know how quickly after the war. Did you ever go back to your hometown?
No, I wanted to. But again, I heard that people who came back, they got killed, and I knew them. They got killed by the Poles because they were expecting that the people, the Jews who came back, maybe they will want some of the goods back, so they got killed. They killed two young men, and they were so tall and big. Before the war, the Polish hooligans were afraid of them, but after the war, they killed them, both of them.
In later years, you didn't go back either. Have you ever gone to Germany?
Yes, after you know, we started thinking about leaving Poland after the Kielce pogrom. I don't know if you heard about it, and how we were treated by the Poles. So we said we better get out of there. So we smuggled out of Poland because they wouldn't let go. And we were helped by the Bricha, if you heard about them, yeah? Yeah. We were helped by them, and we went to Czechoslovakia. From Czechoslovakia, we went to Vienna, and we stayed in Vienna for some time, and then we were sent to Germany, and we lived in Germany for about for about 5 years until we came, yeah, not all, about 4.5 years until we got our permission to come to the United States, because we didn't have nobody here who would sponsor us. Later on, we found that my husband had a cousin, but they were not in a position to sponsor nobody.
Unfortunately, I think we're running out of time on this tape, and I, first of all, want to allow some time. Your son said he had some questions or maybe comments.
Yeah, yes, yeah.
Do you?
Ask me questions? Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah,
Actually, Hank,
I imagine that before you got to the camp, you'd been bouncing all around the country, and you had very little resources. You couldn't take very many possessions. You didn't have a backpack or anything, did you?
No, there was no backpack.
But you did manage to carry that knife through the war.
Yes, I forgot about the knife. Yes, I kept it always on me. I don't know how I kept. Yes, at one time I hid the knife. I had very long hair, and you know it. You can see it in the thing. I hid the knife into my hair, made a roll, and rolled it up. This I remember. One time or other, I did. Oh, I don't know, but it wasn't such a treasure. It was just that I wanted to have something from home.
It was a butter knife, right? It wasn't a self-defense.
No, no, around, you know, you saw it.
Right, I said that for the
Yeah. No, it was not.
Other people had stuff too that they must have brought, and you know, what sort of things were they?
The people from Demblin, who came from Demblin into this camp Demblin, they brought a lot of possessions with them. they even brought the covers, the feather beds, and they brought, you know, a lot of changes of clothes, and they brought jewelry, whatever they could. They brought it to the camp. They were allowed then to bring to the camp, but they came before I came. When I came, the camp was already closed around, and they had a lot easier because, first of all, they knew one another, they knew each other, they were neighbors, they were friends, they were relatives. I came as, you know, as nobody. And if it wouldn't be for him that he recognized that I looked like my sister, and I thought it was he thought it was my sister, I wouldn't have known. But later on, I made friends. Yeah. What else?
So if people had things like that, there must have been some sort of trading and
Oh yes, 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 yes. They came, you know, Poles to the outside of the wire, and they brought bread, they brought the milk, they brought eggs, whatever, you know, they could, and they got a lot for it because people were hungry, they wanted, and they had something, you know, to trade for, so they would trade to keep themselves, you know, alive. And there were a lot of them, thanks to this, that they had better nutrition, that they survived. And the others who came from like me, they were more like me, who came from different ghettos, who didn't have anything, so they were the worst off. I remember one time that I had some potatoes, and I mashed the potatoes up, and I was given bread, and I put the potatoes, the mashed potatoes, between two slices of bread, and I started eating it. And one came up to me, "Oh, what do you have? Cheese?" And I said, "Yes, this is cheese and this is butter, everything together." And I didn't even let them know what it was. But it was, I was young, I was healthy, and I survived. And this, what I had, this lucky break, working in the kitchen, working in the laundry room, working in the fields where there were these vegetables. This wasn't always there, but at intervals I worked at these jobs, and this I could, and that's why I survived. And I survived by knowing how to knit and crochet. This is what I did when in Orleans. This came so handy. This winter I wouldn't have, that winter I wouldn't have survived if it wouldn't be that I had this brainstorm to tell him to do with the wool. And he was a thief in his heart, and I helped him.
And he was a German?
Oh yes, he was a German. He had a wife and children at home, and
was it a real risk for you to suggest something to a German? Was it a risk for you to suggest something to him rather than just take orders?
You know what? We were there a small group, a group of Jewish girls and few Jewish men who were only, you know, attached to do electricity, building something when he needed, you know, there. And there were a lot of Polish girls and boys, but these came and they got minimal pay for it, but minimal, and they went to sleep home. So it was not a problem. A risk, you know what, I didn't think of a risk. I didn't think of it. It just a matter of, I thought maybe this would help me. And it did. But that winter was a hard winter, without, you know, shoes, and without clothes, and without anything, and to go out in the fields. And I was out a few times when the harvest was. And did you ever try to step on cut when a lawn is cut, so it is only grass, but this was weed and this everything, and this was so just like stepping on glass. The Polish girls, they were used to it, and they were doing it, and it didn't bother them that much. But I remember how it was, stepping on these, I don't know how the stubble of it. Ooh, this was terrible. This I remember. And this too, that I could get rid of it. And I didn't think of a risk at all. It was yes or no. You had to take the chance.
It seems like most of your consciousness of the camps is of the Jews and what happened to the Jews. And I mean, were the Germans around a lot? I mean, were they very visible?
In the camps, they made, you know, inspections, daily inspections, or sometimes they would come in and look for illegals. One time they came in and then they took a few men out, and they were accused that the men were smuggling guns into the camp, and they were taken out and shot later.
Were there people who smuggled guns into the camp?
I suppose it was something like this, that they were trying to make, you know, some kind of a revolt or something, and they were taken out and shot. It was still in this labor camp, which was not too much, you know, of shooting going on, and they were taken out, quite a few of them, young men.
When you say not too much shooting, change tape. Are these questions bothering you? Do you want to just be finished with this?
No, I welcome them.
Okay, let me get this out of your way here.
Are you okay?
Yeah, you seem not quite so tired as last time. I hope that's true.
I don't think you heard that.
Maybe not. It's okay. Just if she does start to get tired, then we can stop.
Yeah, my questions are more, like bread and butter, detailed stuff.
No, I... I want to ask you, excuse me, we don't need to, it's the sessions we go by. But if you like it, this is tape number 3. Wanted to ask you, was there ever occasions of pregnant women in the ghettos and camps, and how did that work out?
Afterwards, I found out there was one woman, she was considered an old maid. And she was working, this was in camp in Demblin. And she was working as a housekeeper to a German officer. I didn't know him, but I knew her. And she was always, you know, with a shawl. So nobody would even suspected that she was pregnant. After the war, I found out that she had twins, not from this officer, but from another man, a Jewish man in the camp. And this officer took the twins and he boarded him somehow. And somehow, this is what I heard, this is only hearsay, somehow these twins lived through the war and she got to claim them. I don't know. How she got in touch with this, I don't know. And that these twins went to Israel and they were Jews. I don't know what had happened to the mother, and I don't know, you know, anything about it, but this is what I heard after the war about this. And I heard about a woman who came into the camp and she was pregnant, and she had a baby and they had to drown it.
You mean the prisoners themselves drowned?
Yes, not the prisoners. I don't know who did it. I have no idea, but I heard of her. I had heard of another girl who got pregnant, and it was the same thing. She had the baby, and it got killed. But so any baby, you know, who was born there didn't live. There's no question about it.
When you were liberated by the Russians, did they offer you any food, medical care, any kind of help, guidance?
The Russians didn't have themselves. We were liberated and we went into the town of Częstochowa, and we went maybe 20 people into one house. We were so afraid. I don't know. Now I'm not so afraid to go out in the dark or something. And there we were very much afraid to be separated. We all slept in one room. And then the Russian soldiers came and they said we had to vacate it because they need it for their soldiers. While being there a few days in this room, my husband went out and he found a backpack, a German backpack, and in this was a German coat and boots and socks. He brought it back, and that's what I wore. This was in the winter, it was in January. And I wore it for maybe a few days at night, yes, and there was some underwear, still long underwear in this. And we were so glad that we had something. One night the Russians came. It kept changing, the Germans and the Russians. They kept bombing it. They didn't change on the ground, but they kept bombing it. One night it was the Russians, one day it was the Germans, so we kept pretty much to the house. And when the Russians came one night and they said that we have to evacuate this, we went out and they wouldn't let me take the knapsack. They took the knapsack. But they gave us bread, they gave us cheese, they didn't have too much. They kept pushing, pushing, pushing. They kept saying, do Berlina, that they wanted to go to Berlin. They kept pushing. They didn't have too much. And one time my husband went out and some Russian gave him some potatoes. He went and walked the street, maybe to see somebody, maybe from his family. But he found a Jew who came with the Russian army. He ran away from the Germans and went to Russia, and then he came back with the Russian army, and he made then a lot of money from the Russian army. So he offered, and it was a friend of my husband, so he offered him some money so he could get on his feet. So he said, don't worry, you will pay me back. He did pay him back. And he started a business. This was a business. You couldn't travel, you couldn't get, anything on the premises. You couldn't travel because there were so few cars, which the most of them the Germans took away. So he traveled on the roof of the railroad and fled, because if they went into a tunnel or something, and a lot of people got killed like this. And he went to Lodz, if you heard of this. And there were manufacturers who manufactured stockings and some kind of underwear. So he bought, with this money, he bought this, brought it back again, coming back on the roof, brought it back to Krakow and resold it. But it got so terrible in Poland then that even it was a risk going out there in the marketplace to try to sell it. So that's when we decided.
What was the risk?
The risk, the Polish people. The risk even, that they would start some kind of, that accusing Jews of something, and they would start a melee, and everybody would go, and the Jews would get hurt. That was the risk. And the risk hearing every day, every minute, oh, where did you get from here? How come you survived? You should have been in Treblinka. You should have been here. You should be, this is all what we heard from them. We couldn't stand it any longer. And we knew that there is no future for us.
Had you decided that you were a couple once you were liberated even?
Oh, we married right the next day. By a rabbi who came too with the Russian army. And somehow we I even have a picture of it when we got married. Oh yes, we got married then, we decided. And this one thing, what we were sitting after work, there in camp, and he used to come to my barrack, and we used to sit and talk. So always we dreamt, oh, we will be liberated, so maybe we will have some kids. But we didn't think we would. No, it was just a pipe dream. That's what we just talked about, to keep the hope up. But we never even thought that we will get liberated and that we will live through it.
You
No.
didn't think so?
No. Not at all. And then it did come through, we got liberated. And somehow we made it. Somehow.
How did you manage once you found out that your whole family was dead?
Just like everybody else. You went on, you went ahead. He found out his family's gone, I found out my family's gone, and then he found out, yes, that's when this was an incentive to leave too, that he found out that a younger brother of his was in Germany. He was liberated, I think in Dachau. In Dachau he was liberated. So this was an incentive to go and to stay. He kept, I don't know how this brother